Oh my goodness, what a weekend of ELF football. The boys are back for Monday morning ELF live recap. I'm your co-host, Nick Alfieri, here with my co-host coming out of the United Kingdom, Matt Bressington, who's got a lot to say about the football games this weekend. What's going on, Matt?
I'm got goosebumps again, even just thinking about these games. I do have a lot to say on this one. I thought I'd dress formally for the first ever win in Prague history in the ELF. So it's been a great week, and yeah, I've got a lot to say, but I'll leave it to the games.
Big respect to Prague, and I like the formal dress, putting on a collar there. I'm dressed in black because I am mourning the Stuttgart Surge's first loss of the year. I'm sad. I'm devastated. We'll talk about it. We'll talk about it all a little bit later. What's going on, guys, in the chat? Michael Football TV, Mark Wilson. We've got a fun show today from some fun game. There it is. I got it out. We're going to talk through our games, and then we're going to look at the playoff picture. Things are interesting. Things are very interesting. And then one team actually secured a conference championship this weekend. We're going to look at which teams are actually eliminated. They're out of the conversation, and who is in the conversation for the playoff picture. Then we're going to revisit our hot takes from last Thursday, where Matt and I were right, where Matt and I were wrong. And then we're going to look at some of the best performances of individual players this week, and we're going to nominate a couple guys for MVP that you will all vote on social media. So, Matt, shall we do it? Shall we dive into the games from Week 12?
Let's get straight
the
into
European League of Football. But here we see first a photo from the ELF partnership with DKMS for fighting against blood cancer, a great cause that was all around the ELF this weekend, like we touched on, at all the games that took place in Germany. There were stands for people to sign up to become donors, stem cell donors, and to get more information to help save lives for people suffering from blood cancer. Really good cause. And here we've got a great photo representing that right there. So, moving on to our beautiful graphic of our games from Week 12, starting off with an Eastern Conference heavyweight showdown, the Prague Lions versus the Fehervar Enthroners. Prague Lions, previously winless, not just this year, but in all years of the ELF. Matt, I know you're happy about this game. You wore a collar to talk about it.
Yes,
Let us know.
Yeah. Let's just get straight into it, man. Like, first and foremost, both offenses kind of let's use the term stunk up the joint. Maybe not the best offensive performance by either of these teams. Only 7 points scored literally in the last couple of seconds of the first half, which, interestingly enough, was only the second time Prague have been winning in a second half of a game ever, which is very incredibly interesting. First time was against Hamburg in game 2 of the league, so 10 weeks. The Prague defense is what I want to talk about. Oh my God, Alexander Borkovic was absolutely outstanding. Game.
Oh, we've lost Matt for a second. Hold on. He'll be back. He's somewhere out there in space. I know he's excited to talk about this game. Oh, and he's just been eliminated from our chat here. So we'll cover for Matt here until he gets back, because I know he's really excited to talk about this Prague game. Yeah, not a big offensive heavyweight showdown, but Borkovic had a great game, and I know Matt wants to talk about it. He had 10 tackles. He had a sack. He had that interception. So he really, obviously, this was a defensive stalemate of a game, and he was a standout. He's probably going to be talked about possibly even in the MVP conversation a little bit later in this show. And there he is, back right on time. Matt, I was just telling the people that I know you're excited about Borkovic's performance. What?
Yes.
Talk about it.
All right, so nailed Mangle with the big sack. And I think the big thing that you could feel with his presence was he got hurt in this game, came off with a shoulder injury. So they missed him. He's out for a few plays. That defense was a completely different team. They looked worse in every way without him on. He comes back on, lights up the Enthrones again, gets the game-winning interception to secure the first win in Prague history in the ELF. He was amazing. He's only a young 24-year-old Serbian safety. Absolutely amazing performance. Honestly, can't speak enough about him. I'm going to talk about it later in the MVP discussions. Mangle had an uncharacteristically turnover game. I know in the preseason I said this was quite regular for him, but he's proved me wrong on that factor. He threw 3 picks in this game, and all of them were quite forced. Of course, the one at the end, he's trying to make something happen. I won't put too much about that. But the 2 earlier picks, maybe not the best decision making. One by Henry, one by Piaton right the goal line. There was a ton of mistakes from the Enthrones end. And people who said this game was boring, no. Like, the tension, you could cut it with a knife, was absolutely amazing, because the ramification, just you knew how much this meant if you'd watched all the Prague games. I've watched every second of Prague I've ever played in the ELF. I knew how much this meant to them, and as much meant to the fans and the team themselves. Absolutely outstanding. One of my favorite games ever, just because it was history.
Absolutely, man. That's a great way of putting it. And yeah, just because it was low scoring, this does not mean it's a boring game. If you know anything about football, sometimes these are the best games that there are. These defensive struggles, and then it comes down to the end right there. And I love these kind of games because it highlights the importance of defense. Would you say that Borkovic is kind of the next Goran Zec, possibly? Serbian safety. We lost Zec. He's retired. He's now entering into the flag football world. Great ELF safety for a few years. Does he have that level of talent?
I think he could be, in like video games, you get regen when one player retires, you get the same nationality, same kind of player, and he comes through the youth ranks. That's exactly how it is. He's 24 years old. He's athletic. I'll be doing a full eval on him in the next couple of weeks, but he's so aggressive. And we've seen him all over the tackle numbers, and people often consume him as a linebacker. He's not a linebacker. He's just that aggressive and that active in that team that he can make all these tackles. He's got 3 picks so far in a year, 1 on Mangle, 1 on Sullivan, 1 on Holmes. It's elite company at the top of this league. He's been a revelation in his team. He was quiet last year because he didn't play all of the games throughout the year. But in this one, he was key. The defensive line helped out a ton as well. I want to give a shout out to them. But just such an inspired performance. You could tell how much it meant to them.
100%. And then in the chat here, SB123 says Prague, best team in the ELF 2025. They will go undefeated. Hot take?
Oh yeah.
So, man, I don't know. This is the first sign of success for the Prague Lions. We don't want to shoot down your hot takes, but that is a hot take. Save that for Thursday. We'll be doing hot takes. Come on back and you can say that. And then Tim Tebow, the GOAT, will lead the Prague Lions to victory. All right. If the Prague Lions sign Tim Tebow in the offseason, then maybe your hot take is not so hot and more realistic. This one ends at 9-6, and history is made out in the Eastern Conference for the Prague Lions. They rebranded in the offseason. They went from that weird bright orange to this sleek scarlet red, a nice elegant logo, and they got their first W. Looks good right there. Congrats to the Prague Lions. All right. From the East, we move to the West. And this is a game that I had the privilege of commentating, and I had to got to watch it in close detail. Got a lot to say about it. But Matt, first, I'll let you fire off your thoughts on this Western Conference showdown.
Here we go. It was a weird game. I was kind of worried about, I really thought that Madrid would take control of this one. And it just didn't seem the way. I've talked about Duncan when he plays worse when they're losing, and they came out losing because of how good Paul Lenhart was to start the game. You can see the touchdown. He got 3 catches, 209 yards, and 2 touchdowns. All of that was in like the first quarter. So he had he really just propelled them into that game. But the weird thing was the Galaxy were 21 points up at one point, and I think everyone watching was like, how are they going to like mess this up? Because we've seen this last week against Cologne. We've seen that Madrid handled Cologne quite easily, so football maths would dictate that they'd be able to come back also against the Galaxy, and they just never did. Their offense wasn't cooking. Molina did a good job, but the presence of Dwayne Obi was missed. The receivers struggled separation. Duncan had some amazing late game heroics, but wasn't as good in the earlier game. McKay did excellent. Sandro did good when he was in the game. He played a lot more this week than he did in the previous. Obviously, I talked about Lenhart. Kevin Kyle with some amazing catches in the third quarter. He was phenomenal. Of course, Hugo Dyrol is basically the European AJ Wentland and how often he's around the football. It was such a, and that end in was great, but then some flags came back, and then it was Duncan running around making some slick plays. It was a very exciting game, and like you said with last week, man, the Galaxy they're upsetting some teams in the top of that pecking order.
I told you, I talked about it last week in the Western Conference, the Frankfurt Galaxy. They're out of the playoff contention, but this is such a talented team. They have played below expectations all year. And when you just look at that roster, you go down this roster, you say, how is this team 3-6, now 4-6? Because of all the talent they have on here. And this week, they played in the manner that we probably expected them. A lot of people expected them to play all year because of the talent that they're loaded with. I think that this game was a real reflection of the reality of both of these teams. Madrid has been overperforming. Frankfurt has been underperforming. And I'm going to go ahead and say, and like I've been on this for a little while here. Madrid Bravos are fool's gold, guys. The Madrid Bravos are fool's gold. And we're going to go into the playoff section here in a little bit. But I'm going to tell you right now, they're going to slip out of playoff contention. They are going to slip out of playoff contention. You heard it here first. I started touching on it a couple weeks ago in the conspiracy corner. But, Matt, you said it. The presence of Dwayne Obi was missed. I did hear that Madrid flew to Frankfurt the day of this game, and it felt like they just came in and had the expectation, we're just going to roll over Frankfurt. And they came out flat. Frankfurt came out inspired. Matthew McKay showing his ability. This is a guy that played big-time Division I college football. He's incredibly athletic. He's got a cannon of an arm. He got it done both through the air and on the ground. He had some incredible runs. Sandro Platzkammer didn't have crazy stats, but we saw his explosive ability and how dangerous he actually can be. I was very, very impressed with him. And then, Castle was a little bit quiet in the receiving game, although he did throw for a touchdown, and he completed another pass on a double pass for like 40, 50 yards. So he just showed his athletic ability. Kaya, I think we're seeing it right here when he lays out there on the highlights. That was super impressive. But I think that this is a real indicator of the true nature of both of these teams. And Madrid has got to play Paris next week. And that is going to be, it's a rematch. Obviously, Paris won earlier in the year. If Madrid loses that game, then things are going to get interesting. And they've been in the playoff conversation all year. We've seen that every week when the ELF releases that playoff graphic. Madrid's right on in there. Might not be like that in the next couple weeks. So that's all. That's what I got to say about this. It was a fun Saturday night game. I had a lot of fun broadcasting it and some really great individual performances on there. And Frankfurt Galaxy, man. Matt, what do you think? Before we move on, what do you think? Fool's gold? Is that too far?
I wouldn't say that's too far. I mean, I was really surprised the defense didn't get like anything, really. We've seen them pick off a ton of teams. We've seen them pick off, quote unquote, better teams with a higher record than the Galaxy. They just couldn't really get it done. I agree with you very strongly. They came out flat. I didn't know about the flight, but now that kind of like shows to me that is probably why it happened. And I think they came in with high expectations and they got fraud checked. Tough one.
Fraud checked. And then in the chat here, Mark says, Madrid did us all wrong. It's all Nelf's fault. You're right. I'll take credit for that. Michael L. very well commentated. I liked it very much. We want more. Thank you, Michael. I appreciate that. I had a lot of fun commentating that game. SH says, yo, Matt, nice video.
Appreciate it.
You haven't seen Matt's breakdowns on his YouTube channel. What are you doing? So this one finishes 37-20. Oh, and Marcus is in the chat. He's at the pool with the family, but they made him a little bit late, but Marcus is here. We love that you're here, Marcus. Thanks for joining us on this Monday morning recap. So this next game, this is an uncomfortable one for me. I'm a little upset, okay? And just before we get into it, before we talk about this game in more detail, I would like to issue a formal apology to Alex Malchow, Euroball Chow on Twitter. He was in the chat last week, and he predicted that the Ravens would beat the Surge. And I believe the words I said to him, you are insane. You're crazy. What a ridiculous thing to say, Alex. What are you talking about? And Alex was right. And so this is my formal apology. I come hat in hands, bow my head. Alex Malchow, I am sorry. I apologize. You were right. Matt, talk to us about this heartbreaking game.
Yeah, sorry, Marcus, man. You picked the wrong time to join in the call. This was he was with me on the stream for this one. This was a stressful watch. Let's put it like that. Obviously, Meyer started off with the kickoff. You see it on the screen. It was immediate, like, well, Surge are going to run away with this one. Then they've just scored the opening kickoff, 13 seconds in. But then the Raiders come on, flare out, Surge get the ball. Interception by Riley Hennessy. This isn't something that we've seen very often. Raiders to capsize, get some points. Surge back on. Another interception. Okay, now this is getting weird. They start moving the ball a little bit. They get to the goal line. They fumble the goal on the ball on the goal line. Was incredible, but then they started picking up some more steam. As Surge do, they tend to get a little bit better every time they step on the field on offense, and that seemed to be the way, especially with Meyer getting some really good action, 122 yards for him on the day. But then the call, and I messaged you during this, of the halftime call, they're up by 10 points. The Raiders have just got a field goal. They have 1 minute, no timeouts. In my opinion, you just run the ball, go into the half with a 10-point lead, play it a little bit safe. You've had a lot of turnovers in the first half. You want to keep things a little bit more conservative. They choose to pass. Riley then fumbles. Raiders get 3 free points, then score immediately on their first drive of the second half. 10-point deficit erased in only about 2 minutes of actual game clock. That, I think, was the moment they lost this game. And we've seen N'Kosi Perry's been very clutch down the stretch of the last couple of games. He did it against Helvetic. He did it against the Surge last time, but fell a little bit short. He did it against Munich in his debut in the ELF. N'Kosi kind of turns up in the fourth quarter. He really does. And he was great in this game. But I know you wanted to give a shout out to a certain receiver, so I'll let you have the time there. But N'Kosi was fantastic. Late flags for the Raiders kind of set them back a little bit. We're like, oh, it's not going to happen. They're not going to do it. And then Weber with the touchdown. And my notes just kind of derive into just words of like, oh my God, and I can't believe this. And it just becomes like a Joker level of just scribble mess. So that's what I have on this game. But oh my goodness, this might have been my favorite game ever in ELF history. The drama, the returns, the turnovers, it had everything you could possibly want from a football game.
Absolutely, man. And like I said, I was there. I'm filming for the Surge on the sideline, in the locker room, in the team zone. We were texting at halftime because you were watching it on the stream, obviously. You guys in the chat say right here, amazing game, hell of a game. You're damn right. This was a crazy, crazy game. Now, started off kind of all Surge, obviously, with the Yannick Meyer kickoff return touchdown, and then they ended up being up. I think it was 28-10 at one point. It's a 3-score ball game. The Surge let them back in it. It was very interesting. And the strange thing here was it was uncharacteristic turnovers from Riley Hennessy. He had the 2 interceptions, and then he had a fumble on the goal line, like QB sneak. When you're reaching out there, punched out. Great defensive play by the Raiders. And so just a lot of stuff not going the right way for the Surge. Not their best game by any means. And I will say, I think, obviously, you guys know that I'm a big Surge fan. I work with them. I got a lot of people that are coaches and players on that team. I try and be as unbiased as possible. It's a little bit hard sometimes, but the positive thing that I will say here for the Surge is even when playing quite sloppy, even when having 4 turnovers to 0 for the Raiders, I believe it ended up being. 4-0 on the turnover margin. The Surge were still winning this game, still in this ball game, still could have won with even not having played well, and especially against a great Raiders team, a team that I do think is a great Raiders team, and they're kind of picking up steam here in the second half of the season. That's a good sign for the Surge. And also, if you're a Surge fan, Marcus, I know you're in here. You said skip this game. We got to talk about it. We got to get it off our chest. The Surge needed this before playoffs. Surge needed to have this adversity right here. And that's exactly what Coach Newman said to the team after the game, that this team can still accomplish everything that it wants to, but this was a wake-up call, a reality check that anything can happen in this league. And that Central Conference, which, like I said, is going to have 3 playoff teams, mark my words, Raiders being one of them. This is an incredibly competitive conference. This guy's not going to get, he's unfortunately probably not going to get talked about in the MVP conversation at the end of the game. Philip Hahn is the real MVP of the league this week. I think his stats end up nine catches for 100 yards, no touchdowns. But the catches that he made in the fourth quarter were so incredibly clutch. I'm thinking back now to one play. It was the play of the game. It was about 4th and 15. This is a home game for the Surge. The stadium was on fire. One of the loudest football environments I have been in recent memory. Everything going against the Raiders. And Philip Hahn makes an incredible catch in between 3 defenders. Great dive by N'Kosi Perry. And the crowd just goes silent. You could just, it was just an incredible change in energy. And Philippon had one or two, or had actually kind of 2 plays like that. And this team wouldn't have won without him. So Philippon, we got to give him a shout out right there. Hell of a ball player, hell of a homegrown European. And this one just ended up being a instant classic. So for my fellow Surge people, we're going to be okay. All right. We're going to be all right. Congrats to the Raiders T-roll. But if you look at the big picture, this is fantastic for European football. We love it. We love to see the competition, the back and forth. These two teams are aggressive against each other. It was chippy. It was real chippy. There was a lot of little extracurriculars. There's shoving. The refs had to really keep these guys away from each other. But a great high energy football game. I could talk about this one for a long time. I'm still hurting. 24-hour rule. I got about 5 more hours to feel sad, and then we got to move on. So that's what we got, guys. That is what we got. And then ELF PD in the chat says Perry has that clutch gene. He really did. I mean, not only that being the fourth quarter, but how loud and how hostile that was for the Raiders, and still being able to make these plays. Michael L says Philip, Mr. Clutch Hone. So that was a good one for us. But we got to move on from the Central to the West. A little bit of a less interesting game, Matt, wouldn't you say? Paris versus Centurions. This one got a little ugly. What do you got?
First half, competitive. Only 16-7 at half. We saw some teams go back and forth. We got the more inconsistent Isaiah Weed this time. 2 interceptions, both of which were in the red zone, which really killed them off in terms of closing that distance and making it a little bit more competitive. But for me, the big thing that came out of this was the Musketeers' run game finally arrived, and it really changed the team in the second half. If you look at the Russian numbers, every week they've been kind of, watch the games, they've not really been there. They've not had a reliable number 1 running back. It's mostly been Edwards carrying the rock. This time, Valumbo, 95 yards, 2 touchdowns. Makari, 88 yards. Just the importance of these big runs for them. 2 touchdowns for them on the day. Edwards, of course, only 3 carries for 30 yards, which is pretty low for Edwards' numbers, but he then got himself 5 touchdowns himself. He, for me, is probably my offensive player of the year, maybe, I think, if I'm going to give a vote. Remy Berthelon, one of the most underrated receivers the league has ever seen. Of course, him and Edwards go all the way back to the Dragons days, so they have a great connection. He got over 200 yards and 2 touchdowns, all of which was in the second half. And again, just the importance of when they were happening, rather than these big games, which are great. It was just on third downs. It was clutch moments just to kill the momentum. Saw the interceptions there by Said as well. And I said in a pregame, and I was kind of wrong about this. It doesn't feature on our right and wrong, but I said the Paris couldn't cover Hill. They kind of covered him. They kind of did. They got out. They didn't really need to cover him one-on-one because they just had so much pressure coming after Isaiah Weed. The defensive line was getting through immediately. Diga and Gomez have made projects about him. You've got Stanley Zaregbe, who's one of the most underrated pass rushers in the league. They got after it. Weed, they made it uncomfortable. Hill only finished with 55 yards in his receiving categories. And it was just overall, we've doubted Paris's cardio in the second half because we saw the Berlin game and they gave up a ton of points. In this game, I think they put out to rest. They scored 41 in the second half alone, and it was just a dominant red zone. Also 7 for 7 on red zone trips as well, which is always going to be pretty clutch.
Yeah, Paris looking smooth. Marcus in the chat says, sorry, I was out to dinner on Thursday. I would have talked some sense into you, Nick. Did I hear you picked Cologne? Now, we had a little exchange on Twitter or X about this one when I saw the score of this game. You know, I was trying to be, listen, Marcus, I was trying to be a little controversial last week. And Cologne had just come off that big win against Frankfurt. And the thing is, you never know with Isaiah Weed. Is he going to be a baller or is he going to be a bust? This week he was a bust. The previous week he was a baller. And, you know, you just never know. Do I regret my decision? Yeah, I do regret my decision. Will I make stupid picks like that again? Probably. But I think maybe I learned a thing or two about betting against Paris. Speaking of which, Matt, real quick before we move on to the next one, with how Paris looked this week and how Madrid looked this week, with this matchup coming up on Saturday, I know we're not supposed to talk about it just yet until Thursday. What's your quick thoughts on Paris versus Madrid rematch? Big playoff implications on that one.
I think in three words or less, I'll go Paris win dominantly.
Oh, I like that. There we go. And Paris did just that this week, finishing with a 50-point win over the poor Cologne Centurions. Next game, I got not so much to say. Matt?
It's a record break. It's a record that has been broken. It's 12 touchdowns on one team for Munich. I've written 12 pages for ELF Live today. One line is contained for this game, and it's just wow. That's all I got, really. It's just dominant, easy win for him, really.
Wow. And those, just for you guys in the chat here, you're talking about the point differential and the way things are looking right now. Obviously, the point differential is a key factor for teams who are going to have the exact same record. There's a lot of teams, or a handful of teams, that are going to be finishing very possibly at 8-4 around there. And these teams need the points. And so you're seeing these kind of run up the score situations for a team like Munich because they're trying to extend their point differential and secure themselves a playoff spot. This one was ugly if you are a Dragons fan. Beautiful if you're a Ravens fan. That's all we have to say about that one. Maxie, let's move on. Oh, at least, hey, kept him in double digits. Wasn't a triple digit one. There we go. So that game sucked, but this next game, another instant classic for the ELF. Eastern Conference rematch, showdown in Berlin. The Wrocław Panthers versus the Berlin Thunder. Two very, very interesting teams. This one was a thriller. Matt, talk to me.
So I want to imagine I don't have a blood pressure gauge, but I would have liked one because I watched the Surge and Raiders game and then I watched this one straight after, like back to back. So my blood pressure was sky high. It was also 28 degrees in the UK, so it was tough. This game might have just taken the cake from the last game of my favorite game of all time. Norwood, especially at the end, but I'll start from the beginning. Oh my goodness, the rushing ability he had was unbelievable. He was running around, making crazy plays, finished with only 84 yards on the air, only one touchdown on the air as well, but had those 135 yards on the ground. And the escapes of these crazy sacks that he had no right of getting out of was amazing. Botel Moreno, amazing with those 2-point conversions in the fourth overtime. It was just so clutch. AJ Wentland, kind of just the normal thing for him to get 17 tackles these days. David got 188 yards and 3 touchdowns. He was amazing. Those third down, I literally said, they could run for it in third down, try and get a field goal out of this. They run it, touchdown. Doesn't matter about the field goal. Berlin actually did all right in the second half, which is something that we haven't really seen them do very often. Whoa. The Berlin Tivities was less so in this one. They kind of let the Panthers go back into it, and then we went into overtime, and they looked like they were going to lose, and then they missed a kick, and then they had Aaron Jackson just walk in for multiple 2-point conversions, and the Panthers just couldn't stop it. There is so much in this game. Of course, I can't talk about everything and everyone. I could probably just do an hour ELF special just on this game, but Aaron Jackson deserves massive shout outs. Of course, his rushing numbers won't be in the stats, but during those overtime periods, he was invaluable. Emil Forvda with a couple of really clutch sacks. There was just there was so much to talk about. Again, my notes devolve into I use like 6 different pens, so the notes are just everywhere. It's a mess. It's 3 pages of just nonsense, especially when it gets into the third quarter. Devin Burrell with that return for the there was so much to talk about in this game that if I talk about all of it, we'll be here forever. So I'll give up the limelight and I'll let you get your thoughts as well.
I mean, man, just what a fantastic game. And to have that kind of tension back and forth, it's so interesting because both of these teams, this is such a back and forth game, so close. And you look, these two teams are essentially the opposite in how they play football. Berlin throws for 382 yards and runs for 60. Wrocław runs for 360 yards and throws for just 60. They're damn near the inverse of each other offensively, yet they're both able to find success, and this comes down to a 2-point ball game. They're also nearly identical in third down efficiency percentage, both 63%. It was the Panthers went 7 for 11, and the Thunder went 12 for 19. So it just goes to show that if you have an identity and you stick to it, you're able to score points. You're able to have yourself a football team. So it's especially interesting to me, though, because when a team is one-dimensional, it is easier as a defense to kind of bottle them up. And I'll say if that one dimension is passing, it's a little bit more difficult to bottle them up because there is so much you can do, so many different guys you can go to through the air. But the Panthers are so one-dimensional offensively that they're just running the ball. And it is surprising to me that the Thunder were not able to kind of bottle that up. And we got some really talented backs there, Brzozowski, and of course Norwood. He ran for over 100 himself. But it is just interesting to me that Berlin Thunder were not able to bottle up a very one-dimensional ground game. What do you think about that, Matt?
Berlin have never really had a great inside interior line. That was what we talked about in previous weeks of their run game. They have amazing edges. Kyle Kitchen's also half a sack away from breaking the all-time record, which is his own record. And the interior was open for him all day. David is a supremely good homegrown player, as a former homegrown of the year winner. He was amazing at just so many clutch situations. He stiff-armed Alex Spinner, who both of us love Alex and think about how good he is.
Yep.
But that run was like a beast quake. Like it was, and I'm getting up there in terms of blood pressure again. But this game, amazing, like you said, the inverses. It's kind of hard to stop as many run opportunities as they have because they had Norwood who was able to take off. He was a D1 receiver who played high school football as a quarterback. So he has experience as a quarterback. He's a D1 athlete at UCLA as a receiver, so he has ability with the ball in his hands. And they just never really stopped it. I think they lacked a little bit more speed, and a lot more speed was on that Voshta Panthers offense than comparable to the Berlin Thunder defense.
That's a great point there. And then in the chat, Marcus says he was Googling emergency numbers in England for Matt. He was sure that he was going to faint at some point. We're glad you're okay.
999.
Raising the blood pressure. This one, an instant classic. Berlin Thunder escaping 36-34 and able to get revenge from that opening loss against the Panthers in week 1. Now to our last game. We've talked about a couple phenomenal games, a couple not so exciting games. This last one also not so exciting as the Rhine Fire were in peak form and dominated in Rhine Fire fashion. Matt, what do you have to say about this one?
Hamburg's offense, again, stunk up the joint. They never really got started. They didn't put any points on the board overall. Fulford didn't get over 100 yards through an interception. The run game was a clear priority. They had three people with over 10 carries on the ball, none of which went over 34 yards, which is never a good sign. D-line, I think, for Ryan did a really good job. Aaron Donkor, especially in the second half of the year, has been excellent. A lot of tackles for losses, a couple of really key hurries, and a sack as well. We just kind of saw more Prague depth and Glenn Tonga. That was I keep saying Prague. Ryan depth and Glenn Tonga. That was kind of the motive of this one. We saw the kick that was returned. That was the only points they got in the day. So I think that sums up the Hamburg's side of it. And Ryan, it was pretty easy for him. I think Ugapo deserves a shout out for the Hamburg defense. He did really, really well. And that's pretty much all I've got. Like, it was just a simple, easy. I know Jadrian threw 2 interceptions, one of which by Toby Nader, who I played with. Shout out to him. One at the end to the half, trying to force some points. So one of which maybe not put as much credence into as they go into the playoffs. But yeah, it was another easy Ryan win, and I think they can just move forward into the next game with another notch in their belt. And Hamburg now have the longest losing streak in the ELF now that Prague have won. So that's pretty interesting.
That is interesting. And you know what? I've got to point out a couple weeks ago, actually now a couple months ago, is near the start of the season. Raiders T-Roll got rid of D'Angelo Fulford. And I posted something on Twitter, and it kind of got a lot of traction. A lot of people seem to agree with me. I basically said, what are you doing, Raiders? This is 2 years in a row where you've cut your quarterback. What does this signal to players? How are you going to attract players to want to come play for you when you feel like they're playing, looking over their shoulder every week? And I might have to eat my words on that now, because it seems like they really made the right move. D'Angelo Fulford has just been pretty brutal up at Hamburg after getting picked up there. I mean, it's very common for him to throw under 50%. Not great. We just saw him. We just talked about N'Kosi Perry really settling into his own. And, you know, Perry's not perfect, but he's been pretty clutch and a substantial step up from Fulford. So after seeing Fulford play in the second half of the season here, and I know he doesn't have much help, but I think that's just what comes to mind. I might have to eat my words a little bit on that one because the Raiders seem to be getting the last laugh in that quarterback decision. So that's all I've got to say about that. Ryan Fire smacking the Hamburg Sea Devils. And there it is, 51-2. And that brings us to the end of our game recap. What do you say? We had 3 great ones, one kind of interesting one with Frankfurt Bravos, and then 3 snooze fests.
Yeah, I think that's so. History was made regardless. Like, I thought these games were great. I think it's probably the best week we've ever had in the ELF, in my opinion. Like the amount of talent, the amount of intrigue, the different styles of games, and the matchups. Yeah, I wrote the script for this week. I'm proud of myself for that one.
There we go. Good script writing. So that's our games from week 12. And now we take a look here at the standings. Gosh, that's beautiful. What jumps out to here, Matt?
Got the lack of O against the Surge. It's got to be the one, of course. We got the Raiders and Ravens, literally neck and neck. Couldn't be any closer if you tried. That your conspiracy corner is becoming realer by the day, and I think that's what's drawn me. Is those. It's just such an interesting level. We got so many teams on 7-3, and how that's going to work out. It's going to be interesting to say the least.
Yeah, we got that. And now I think, Maxie, if you will pull up here our current playoff picture. So the big change here is obviously the Surge bumped back after getting that loss. Now we've got to remember there's still 2 more weeks here left in the regular season. The Surge are playing against Barcelona and Helvetic. Those are probably 2 wins. Those are probably 2 big wins. So they are going to have to, now that they have 1 loss, let's assume Vienna Vikings finish out undefeated. The Fire and the Surge are going to be the 2 1-loss teams. And then I believe it will go to point differential between those 2 to see who gets the number 2 seed and that first week bye and the automatic grant to the semifinals. And it's probably going to be the Surge. So this is obviously they bump back this week, but as things will shake out, that's probably how it's going to look. So fortunately, Marcus, for us Surge fans, I think we'll still be okay right there. And even with the loss, look at that beautiful graphic. The Surge are the Central Conference champions. They clinched that 2 years in a row. And I just gotta point out again, because maybe we take it a little bit for granted, what Jordan Newman, that coaching staff, and those players did turn that program around from the worst team in the league now to winning the Central Conference 2 years in a row. And I think that's just a great lesson and something that we can all remember here in the European League of Football. If you get the right coaching staff, you can really rebuild in 1 year. It's very, very possible. So that's an exciting thing. And then here in the playoffs, the Ravens have snuck in up there playing against the Paris Musketeers. Matt, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think that last spot is going to interchange a few times, maybe over the next couple of weeks, and then it's going to be settled with like the battle for the playoffs in week 14 between the Ravens and Raiders. And I think the Raiders really set themselves up nicely for it to beat the Surge, which, let's be real, not very many people thought they were going to do. And they walked away with a massive, massive win in this game. So I think I'm still favoring the Raiders to make this. I didn't think they would. I think I said I favored the Ravens last time, but I'm buying in. The Raiders proved me wrong, and I think they you had them in your power rankings. I didn't, and I think I've left with a bit of egg on my face for that one. You definitely seem to be right on that one.
And there we go. We see that the Raiders are the team that are still in the hunt. Just going to the chat here, guys. I see you guys are upset about the tiebreaker rule, that it goes to points. A lot of people, not super happy about that, but that's just the reality of what we got this year. Maybe there's some changes in the offseason, but this year that is the situation. And so that's what we've got to keep in mind going into these last 2 weeks. Certain teams like Munich, certain teams like the Surge who will benefit from in having big wins here. But let me just talk through the conspiracy corner again that I touched on a couple weeks ago. And I've been hammering this home. And the fact is, in my opinion, there we go, Maxie, you got the graphic already. There we go. I'm fired up. Woo. Right now, as is, we saw the Raiders win, but they're not in the playoff picture. What? That doesn't make sense. Give it 2 more weeks. This is what's going to happen. The Bravos just lost to the Frankfurt Galaxy, right? They are now 7-3. They have to play Paris this week. Paris is looking great. Bravos are trending in the wrong direction. Paris is going to win that game. It's in Paris as well. Paris already beat them on their home turf. They're going to beat them, I think, even more handily. And if Dwayne Obi's not playing, it's going to be extra bad. Their offense did not look good without Dwayne Obi. So let's say there that Bravos lose this week. That'll put them at 7-4. They play Hamburg the next week. They'll extend Hamburg's losing streak, and then the Bravos will finish at 8-4. Paris has Madrid and Frankfurt left. They will likely probably win both of those games, although with what we saw from Frankfurt, it could get interesting when they play Frankfurt Paris in the last week of this season. Doesn't matter, though. Either Paris finishes at 10-2 or 9-3. They're in the playoffs. Raiders T-Roll. Currently at 7-3 after that big win against the Surge. They have to play Milano. That's going to be a win. Makes them 8-3. Then they play Munich, who they beat before. And now the Raiders, are a better team than they were back then, even when they beat them. It is going to be at Munich this time, but when I talk to a lot of players that have played against both of these teams, they think that the Raiders have this in the bag, that they'll win against the Ravens in week 14, and that's going to put them also at, 9-3. Munich, the other one, who's currently on the graphic, but they, they've got a little bit of an interesting thing going out here. There they are. They are 7-3. They play Helvetic next week. That's going to put them at 8-3 if they win, which we think they will. And then they'll play Innsbruck, put them at 8-4. Sorry, that was a little long-winded, but it is just to say that Munich and Bravos are going to finish at 8-4, very likely. Then it comes down to point differential, and Munich has a large advantage in that, especially with that 90-0 win this last week. And they're going to get into the playoffs. It's going to be Paris. It's going to be the Raiders. It's going to be the Fire. It's going to be the Ravens. And then it's going to be Surge and Vienna. So you see Madrid there in the red at the bottom. Get ready. They're going to be gone. That's my conspiracy corner, how we're going to play out in the next 2 weeks. Do you think it's going to happen, Matt?
Yes.
Nice.
So I think it's gonna happen. I like it. I'm a big fan. I think it all just makes sense. It's too logical. I can't deny it.
Nice. There we go. And Michael in the chat there, Surge is the division winner and Rhine Fire not. Well, they just haven't clinched it yet. They still have to win another game. It's because Paris is only one game behind them and there's still 2 more weeks. Whereas in the Central Conference, no team can catch the Surge. So that is why. Whew. Okay. So there we have it, guys. A little fired up here. The last couple weeks of the regular season heading into playoffs can be interesting. We have to take a quick break. We'll call it a coffee break and a message from a fan or a friend of the show, Mr. Brad Pitt. Take it away, Maxie.
New Revelia by DeLonghi. Switch to your new coffee experience. Perfetto.
Gosh.
There we go.
Brad Pitt. Just
Brad.
What a guy. He was texting Matt and I in the group chat. He was pretty shocked about the Raiders beating the Surge. He was impressed with Nkosi Perry in the clutch, but that's a friend of the show. So it's like a great coffee machine right there as well. All right, Matt. Should we face our demons and go into right and wrong, where we were right and where we were wrong? And at least for me, there's going to be a lot of red on this section. This one's tough. Matt, you're up first. Take it away.
Boy, did I ruin a few people's fantasy weeks this week. I went for the receiver build. I put together on my Instagram and put some of the speedier guys as my option. Robitaille didn't have a great game overall. Widdy P didn't have a great game overall in terms of fantasy, as far as I'm concerned. Not the best performances. I think I mentioned Marvin, I believe, and Heath did fine, but wasn't one of my official pickups, so it's still a tremendously bad one. Definitely my worst week ever in terms of my fantasy suggestions, but don't take this as gospel, guys. I still have a good track record. It's just this was a weird week, and I didn't have a very good one in terms of predicting the outcomes of these.
We all have down weeks, man. And this week there were some surprises anyway. So, it's tough. It's tough. We won't hold that against you. We still will keep the Matt's fantasy corner, fantasy advice from the professor on Thursdays. My turn, Nick. Cologne will make it interesting with Paris. Now we've got it wrong here, and that's fair. But one could argue maybe losing by 50 is interesting. That was interesting to me. I did not think that was going to happen, because when I said that they'll make it interesting with Paris, I thought coming off of that big comeback win against Frankfurt the previous week, Isaiah Weed, when he's on. That's a different team when he plays well. He did not. Paris looked great. Paris hitting that stride in the last few weeks, heading into playoffs. Fantastic. Cologne, so inconsistent. They break my heart very, very often. I don't know what to feel with Cologne, and they made me come out here wrong on this one once again.
Tough one. I made a bit of a call. Yeah, let's go with that. Okay. I said I thought that it was going to be very similar to Paris versus Ryan. Well, it's very close to the first game. One team makes the adjustments. I said I thought Surge was going to make the adjustments and win by +10. It is fair to say that one was a bombastic call, which led me to be extremely wrong when they lost by 3 points. That was probably my worst take I've ever had on the LF Live, as aged like milk in the sun. It was rather awful. Not one I'm proud of, and yeah, I don't want to talk about it.
We'll move on. Get that off the screen, Maxie. There we go. Maxi's hanging it on the screen right there. There we go.
There we go.
Oh, actually, this one says Matt, but it was mine. So, Maxie, if you want, you can fix it, but it doesn't matter. There you go. Thanks. I said Robitaille will have 3 touchdowns. Every time I try to believe in somebody on the Enthroners, I've done it with Jack Mangle 2 times, and now I've done it with Nathaniel Robitaille, a friend of mine and former teammate who I believed in, let me down this week. I said he'd have 3 touchdowns. He had none, and they went on to lose and deliver Prague their very first win in the ELF. So I was wrong. And what both the Centurions and the Enthroners have broken my heart multiple times this year. And I might have to break up with them. I don't know if I can make any takes with these guys anymore.
Yeah, that's fair, I think.
There's Mal Chow in the chat. Apology accepted, Nick. Good. Alex, I hope that you were able to see that. If not, I think I did at the beginning of the show.
Yeah.
Right? You have to go back. Maybe you can, record that and print it out or something. You were right, Alex. You were right. And we harassed you and we denied you and we made fun of you. But you know what? They used to do that back in the day with Galileo. He said that the earth revolved around the sun, not the other way around. Everyone thought he was crazy. Alex Malchow's the Galileo of European football this week, so he deserves the apology. There we go. All right, Matt, that's our right and wrongs.
Mm-hmm.
Now into the final segment of the day, the top individual performances of the week. Our guys who are in the MVP conversation. Guys in the chat, throw your nominees, guys you think need to be shouted out here. We'll consider them, and then we're going to decide here on 2 guys, and then the ELF will put it on Instagram where everyone can vote. Maxie, will you put on up our graphics here? Hey, Matt, it's your boy.
It's my guy, Borkovic. One of the best games I've ever seen from a defensive back in this league. He was absolutely everywhere. 10 tackles, sack, and interception, multiple pass deflections on the day that haven't just gone up on the stat sheet, but it will at some point. He was absolutely imperative. He went off with an injury, came back on, absolutely iced the game with an interception. He was amazing. One of the best young safeties in the league, and I love Alexander. I think he's a great player.
There we go. The Serbian sensation. Maxie, who is next? Is it? Okay, Bertellen, who I went crazy. And I said this in our chat this morning, Matt. 4 catches for 206 yards. That's an insane stat, averaging 52 yards a catch, whatever it is, 51 and a half yards a catch. Pretty good. 2 touchdowns tacking on. It was against Cologne. Still a great performance, though. Who's next, Maxie?
Ooh, Zach Edwards. Again, you said, like, with Cologne, not great, but he still lit him up. I think he's still one of the front runners for Offensive Player of the Year. 441 passing yards as well. His passing has taken a real step up. He's actually, if you look at his numbers, accuracy gone up every single year in the ELF. He's a lot more proficient in his passing game every single year. And this was just another example of that.
Fantastic. Maxie. Hovde, 10 tackles, 2 sacks. Fantastic defensive performance. We love when the defensive boys get a little bit of shout out here and some mention in the MVP conversation. Look at that right there. Next one, Maxie. There you go, Matt.
Jacob Sullivan, another great game, proved that they've had some second half issues, but he took the team on the back in the second half, so had some really successful periods in overtime as well, which set him up nicely. And overall, real clean, solid game, 55 passing attempt.
See, in the chat, we've got Oyeezy. I believe that's Omari Williams. He said Roby let us all down. That's your boy, Omari. That's both of our boys, and he did let us down, didn't he? Come on, Big Ropes. Next one, Maxie. I am excited about this one. Matthew McKay against the Madrid Bravos, leading his team to the upset. 19 for 25, 278. He was great through the great. He was the difference maker for this Frankfurt Galaxy offense. I picked him a couple weeks ago. I thought it would be in the MVP conversation. I've had it a couple times. Now he finally deserves it, and he's in there, and I'm happy about that. Matthew McKay.
There we go. And Cozy Perry, Mr. Clutch Gene, amazing in the fourth quarter. Dimes to Philip Hahn, who deserves his credit, but it was absolutely spectacular in the second half, especially this game. 19 for 35, 260 flat passing yards, 4 touchdowns, including the game winner to put them ahead and end Surge's win streak. Incredible.
Yeah, that one hurts. That one hurts. Then, okay, I can never know how to say. I never know how to say the name.
I believe Zoringbal.
Zorin, yeah, you got it, Matt. Take it. You know what? Anybody from Munich right now, you take it because
There you go. I'll just go to Munich. This one's going to be a long period. We'll do this in quick succession. Zoringbal, amazing, absolutely everywhere, but against a terrible offensive line, but still 3 sacks, 6 tackles, multiple fumbles and recoveries and tackles for loss. He was incredible. Next one, shooting Max. I'll take all the Ravens in one go.
There we go.
Chad Jeffries, 5 touchdowns, super efficient, absolutely clinical. Weird touchdown at the start, but 251 at 13 out of 20. Amazing, efficient, great performance by him. Polier, I mean, he got 6 carries for 74 yards and 3 touchdowns. Can't really complain about that. That's efficiency numbers are off the charts. Malik Stanley, amazing. 5 catches, 140, 2 touchdowns. He's Malik Stanley. This is just an average Tuesday morning for him at this point. He's phenomenal. And then there we go.
Your boy Brzezowski, fantastic performance. They did end up losing, but he went 24 for 188, 3 touchdowns, some fantastic, very, very impressive rushes. The man out in Poland. All right, Matt, those are our guys. I know we don't have a graphic for it, but Philip Hahn has got to be in this conversation. Is one thing as a football player that you don't always love is when we make decisions just based off stats. And he had a very, very solid game. I mean, 9 catches for 100, but it's just not such a crazy stat line that we would put him in the MVP conversation just based off stats. But he does need to be in this conversation because that team does not win without him, without him making those clutch receptions. So he's also in this conversation. He's got to be for me. All right, so let's talk, Matt. Who's jumping out to you?
For me, it's got to be Alexander Bortkovich. He was just, like you say, stats don't tell the whole story, and he had stats, but he was also just, without him, they do not win this game. I'm absolutely sold on that, not only because he got the pick at the end, but just his presence, the deflections on 3rd and 4th down, the key tackles. He's a tackling machine. He's like 3rd in the league, 4th in the league for it. They do not win this game without him. Like, start to finish, he was buzzing around the field. He's a defensive back, so it means it's close to my heart. He's a homegrown player for the team, which means he's more valuable in terms of his impact. I think it's him. He secured the first ever win for the team. And for me, that goes beyond stats, even though he did also have that. If you want to be a person that's about the stats.
If you want to be a stat person. Okay, I like that. I love giving defensive guys love. I am consulting the chat here. Ricardo Oliveira says, a team that beat the undefeated team, and there's only one player from that team. Crazy. And that's very fair points. I'm thinking long and hard right now. N'Kosi Perry would be the other who I would consider from that. I do think that, I mean, I really like Matthew McKay's performance. That was a big upset. He played great. But I think that that win against the Surge was one of the biggest wins so far this year. N'Kosi Perry, not phenomenal on his stats here. 19 for 35. That's not a fantastic completion percentage, but he was clutch when it counted.
It was a team win.
It was a team win.
You know what I mean?
But I don't know, man. After watching that game live and then rewatching the stream, to me, that's what I came away with. This doesn't happen without Philip Hahn. Guys, what do you think in the chat? Is it crazy if I throw Philip Hahn as the nominee, because not based off stats, but actually based off clutch plays?
Both of us going off clutch plays.
Yeah, going off clutch plays. I think people on social media would be a little bit confused if they didn't watch the game and they're only going off stats. But Matt, is that not our job? Is that not our job?
We're analysts.
Analyze the football.
Yeah.
We're analyzing football. We're not analyzing just stats, and it's more than stats. I don't know, man. I'm leaning. Something's bubbling up in me, and as much as it pains me to say it, Maxie, can we do it? Even though we don't have the graphic? I'm thinking Philip Hahn. That's my nominee for MVP. Thank you. Maxie said yes to me. Philip Hahn is my MVP. The fiery guy, homegrown wide receiver, European, and he really, when it mattered, was the most clutch player that I saw this weekend. Philip Hahn, you got it, bro. You got it. He's a funny guy. He oftentimes when he'll catch a ball on like our sideline, he'll turn and he'll chirp. He chirp my friend and Surge coach Cody Pastorino. He chirped me. Friendly chirps, but he's a fiery guy. He's a very fiery guy. Philip Hahn, you got my vote, man. You got my nomination. That's what we got to do.
He's a great blocker too. He's a great European blocker.
Yeah, great. And we'll let that all be a lesson to everybody. It's not just about stats. It's about heart. It's about clutch.
And I went for Alexander Borkovic, just in case anyway. Yeah, so we got those two, and that's the two guys. Both amazing.
I like it. I'm proud of our picks, man. I like that we have a defensive. I like that we have an offensive, two Europeans, and not just off stats.
Yes.
Great.
I think that's the important thing. We analyzed the games. We didn't just go for stat numbers.
I mean, we're getting close. So that's our MVP nominees there. And just, we want to give a little shout out here to the ELF Game Pass, because obviously there were some boring games this weekend, but there were some phenomenal games this weekend. And I just love the fact that if I didn't get to catch a game live, I go on the ELF Game Pass and I can watch it in 4 different variations. I can watch the 7-minute highlights. I can watch the extended highlights at like 12, 13 minutes. I can watch the game in 30, just like the NFL does on their Game Pass, 25 to 30 minutes, get you a little bit more in detail. Or I can watch the whole damn game. And there is a playoff special package, 20 euros, and you can watch the entire playoffs that are coming up. That's a phenomenal deal. A lot of other places will charge like $12 for one game. I think 20 euros to watch the ELF playoffs. Matt, you think that's worth it?
Absolutely. I mean, I think I have watched every game, and I think I've watched every game at least 2 or 3 times. Especially as a scout, I'm constantly watching it, so I've more than got my money's worth out of the Game Pass. I think it's great.
Yeah. And just the fact that you can watch whatever your desired level of in-depth watching the game is, you can do that. And then
every game from the past, like you can watch 2000. You want to watch Madrid London? Watch Madrid London. Like you can do that. It's great.
Exactly. Yeah. Ricardo Owens, did you see the extended highlights of the Raiders? Yeah, I watched the extended highlights, and I watched the entire game with my eyeballs from the sideline, which is tough to beat, but the Game Pass is the next best thing. So we tell you guys, grab that 20 euro playoff package, because the ELF playoffs are going to be damn awesome. Then you can watch the championship game too. Matt, it's 12:59. We are 1 minute. How do we do this? Schedule.
I mean, let's just waffle on a little bit. That's what we got to do. You just got to say about how we're going to finish this. We discuss how we're going to finish it, and before you know it, after a minute, we're all good.
I want you to out
Devon Taylor from from the Raiders. Like, we've still talked about how good he is and how good their receiver core is. He did an amazing job blocking out people on the outside. They went a lot more to Garrick, who also had a good game and 2 breakups on Darryl Stewart for the most part. So I want to shout out Devin Taylor, has one more underrated defensive backs in the league.
There we go.
He deserves his credit. And I'm going to just talk a little bit more about how Guy did not have the best of games in this one. And I think that was maybe one of the reasons why he was one of the Homegrown Players of the Year nominee for me. And that will take us to the 1 hour mark.
Perfect. And we've got a couple seconds left. Guys, thank you so much for joining us in the chat here on ELF Live Monday morning. That's 1 hour exactly. The boys are signing off. We will see you on Thursday. Make sure to vote on the ELF Instagram for the nominees, whoever you think should be the MVP. And we will see you Thursday. Matt, see you later, brother.
See you later.